Okay, so let's talk about how to make our meat choices a bit healthier. So let's start with the most harmful types, and then we'll move our way backwards. Okay, interesting to know that processed meats are associated with increased risk of diabetes. By processed meats, I'm talking about meats that, for example, hot dogs, sausages, salamis, bolognas, pepperonis, those cold cuts of meats, those deli meats. These they're very small, but they have a lot of saturated and trans fats. And there's also some evidence that shows that they increase the risk of cancers as well. So the point is, if you are someone who already eats a lot of these deli meats, or at least on a regular basis, then start limiting it. The goal is to change your diet slowly towards a healthier lifestyle. And that's the whole point of our medical nutrition therapy. So I'm going to show you, in most cases, the red meats versus white meats don't matter as much in terms of the harms, but definitely white meats are healthier. So if you see the calories, and I'm going to focus more on fats today. So if you look at the fat in bologna, that's about 16 grams. So anything that's 5 grams or more of fat is a lot of fat. If you look at pepperoni, it has about 26 grams of fat. So these are all high fat. And if you look here, look at the saturated fat. This is about 1 serving size of any deli meats. Look at the saturated fat content here and look at the fat percentage. That's significant. We remember what our aim is to get to 5%. So that's one of those places that we can start reducing calories and saturated fats from the diet. Okay, so that would be one thing. And then you've probably heard about red meats versus white meats. So this is going to be a very interesting question. Now, I want you to answer which of these animals have the least amount of feet. Okay. So we have crabs, we have chicken, we have a fish, and then we have a cow. If you can put in your answers, which one has no legs, and then which one has the most legs. Just for understanding's sake, the more legs an animal has, the more fats and cholesterol they have. So although you've probably heard shellfish and seafoods are good for you, and they are to some extent, but they still have a lot of fat in them. So if you think about shrimps, crabs, lobsters, they have a lot of legs. So they still are high in fats. So you still want to be a little cautious of them. Now, if we go backwards, so the most amount of legs would be this one. And then the next most amount of legs is a cow or a goat, or, those cattles. They have 4 legs. So even they have high amounts of fats in them. And then when we go to a chicken, which have 2 legs, they have less. And then when we get to fish, they have very little or no. So the point is, the less legs an animal has, this is not a set in stone, this is not scientific, but this is generally a way to understand that the less legs an animal has, the less fat it does have. Okay, so I want you to keep that in your mind the next time you are planning. Okay, so the next thing, so although chicken have less amounts of fat, it is the skin of chicken that you want to start looking at and be cautious of. So if you compare a chicken breast with skin and a chicken breast without skin, I want you to notice the amount of calorie difference. This one is about 500 calories, and this is about 260 calories, just by removing the skin. The total fat and saturated fat, see, the saturated fat with the skin on is 7 grams, and the saturated fat without the skin is less than 1 gram. So that means that when you do cook chicken, first of all, try to make sure you remove the skin, or whether it's chicken or turkey, remove the skin of it before you cook. Because if you leave the skin on and cook with it, all the fat from the skin is going to go inside the meat. And even if you remove the skin and eat the chicken or turkey after, you still have all that fat in the meat. So it's better to remove it before you marinate and cook your meats. Okay, so if we see here again, just to reemphasize that point, skinless chicken, I just want you to know, you notice the difference in calories. A skinless chicken breast is about 100 calories, and the one with the skin on is double the calories. Same with chicken thigh. You want anything with more skin has pretty much double the calories and double the fat. Okay, so let's move on. So the main idea is that you want to try choosing leaner cuts of meats, making sure that you remove the skin, you trim off any visible fat that is on your meats. And when you're done with cooking, make sure if there's any excess fat, drain it off and because that's just extra calories and extra unhealthy fats that are coming in your body. Now, when it comes to choosing lean cuts of meats, this is something that I wanted to share. When it comes to red meats, especially things like lamb, beef, pork, veal, goat, I want you to notice the difference in fat. So generally for most people, depending on your calorie range, usually your limit of saturated fat should be between 6 to 8 grams per day. Now, if you notice a single small portion size, the portion that I've talked about, a single serving of lamb in that portion has 8 grams. The entire daily budget of saturated fat that you could have, you're just getting it from that one single serving of lamb. Now, if we look at beef, depending on the cut of the beef, it gets a bit less. So beef has a little less. It has about 6 grams. Lean ground beef has about 5. When you get to pork and veal, they are less. They're about half the serving, the fat of lamb. And this is saturated fat, not general all fat. But I just wanted to talk about saturated fat. And if you look at goat meat, it's just 1 gram. So if you had the choice, if you are someone who eats red meats, first of all, we'll talk about reducing that. But if you had to choose, I would rather you choose a goat meat or a veal over something like a full fat lamb and beef. But if you still wanted to do lamb and beef, you still want to make sure that you're removing that visible fat that's on the meats. So what are lean cuts of meats? So in most types of meats, pork loin, chicken breast, these are leaner meats in general, sirloin when it comes to steak, and round roast. All right. So the whole point now we're coming to is meats, they are okay for you, but in general, meat wasn't always the norm. It wasn't always something that we ate every day. If you think about being farmers, if we were farmers, we wouldn't be cutting our lambs and our goats and our cows every day to feed our families. We would probably have been doing that less often, more maybe on special occasions or once a month or something like that. So meat have never ever been so readily available to us than they are now. That's why it's a good habit to try at least 1 or 2 days a week, just go completely meatless. Just make sure you have no meats. That's one way to train our body and get it back to what Mother Nature designed our body for. So trying to replace red meats or white meats, in general, all types of meats, with plant-based protein. So for example, whenever we talk about removing things, we always have to start thinking about things we can add. Always take it in the positive direction. So what can we add? So let's say we decide 1 day a week we'll not have any meats. In that meal, there's actually a meta-analysis that looked at it, that if you substituted 1 meat serving, any red meat serving, with 1 serving of nuts, low-fat dairy, and whole grains, you can actually reduce the risk of your diabetes by 16 to 35%. And point is that saturated fat has a link with diabetes. We always think carbohydrates is linked to diabetes, but there's actually a lot of evidence that actually supports that saturated fat is one of the leading factors in the first step of developing of diabetes. So unfortunately, it's very important to make sure we're both managing carbs and fats. So what I would like to do here is ask you to think of what meal could you make which contains at least a serving of nut, a dairy, and a whole grain instead of a red meat. Okay, so I think you are thinking in the right direction. So just keep going, just keep exploring what else could you do instead of a red meat. Now, there are more sources, that's not the only way to replace red meats. We talked about nut butters, oatmeal, the whole grain. Even oatmeal has some protein in it, it has about 6 grams. You could do eggs, you could do Greek yogurt. Greek yogurt has more protein than just regular yogurt. So if you did choose a yogurt, I'd rather you choose a Greek yogurt because of the protein in it. And then any types of beans, even some green vegetables have protein in them as well. But the best ones would be plant-based proteins like legumes and lentils. So like I said, about 1/3 cup to a 1 cup serving gives almost the same amount of protein that would be in a meat portion. You could also do tofu, you could do black beans, you could do all kinds of beans. So the idea is once a week or twice a week, the days when you're going to go completely meatless, replace it with either the whole grains and nuts that we talked about or a beans of sorts. So it could be black beans, chickpeas. Now, for those of you who are already vegetarian and who already don't eat meats, for them, making sure you're getting legumes and lentils on either a daily basis or at least an alternate day basis. If you, I think the Mind diet had you eat legumes and lentils every alternate day. So the more you get in, the better, because they have, first of all, they have none of the saturated fats. Now, saturated fats only come from animals. There's no way a plant can make saturated fats. So anything that comes from a plant has no saturated fats in most cases. And then it has a lot of fiber, which animal protein doesn't have. So animal meats have no protein. So that's very important to get lentils and legumes. And I have sharing you how to cook them because it's not many people know how to cook them, but you can also use the canned version. You can definitely use the can as long as it's only the beans in water. It shouldn't be in sauce. And then you can drain the can and you can use it. So you don't have to necessarily cook it or soak it overnight. You can use canned beans as well. So let me ask you guys, how many meatless meals do you think you're currently having? Now the options are about 0 to 6 servings per week, or 1 to 2 servings meals every day, or 1 to 2 days, entire days that is completely meatless, or do you have more than 3 days a week that is meatless?